It's a holiday story. It's a family story. It's a story of thousands of twinkling lights and countless memories. A story of crackling fireplaces and candlelight Christmas evenings, where the sounds of sleigh bells and carols echo all around. It's a story of peace and togetherness, of glittering ornaments, fragrant wreaths, and wide-eyed wonder. It's the enchanting story of a beloved tradition at America's largest home, with 250 magnificently decorated rooms, each with its own stories to tell. But all this can't begin to tell the full story of Christmas at Biltmore. Come walk in the footsteps of the Vanderbilt family and immerse yourself in a winter wonderland of endless holiday delights. Because as wondrous as the story of Christmas at Biltmore may be, it can never be complete without you. Plan your stay at Biltmore.com.
I would like to be happy, but who's happy? I think trying to be happy is almost as difficult as trying to be a good actress.
Welcome to Bite Size Bios. This is meant to be a mini-sode that will accompany HDTH. Every week, I will pick a person from history and dive into their lives. All right, welcome back to another episode of Bite Size Bios, BSB. This is number 42 coming at you guys today. We're going to talk about Marilyn Monroe. We're going to find out first off that was not her real name, but what that name means to her as well. Before we get to that, of course, because this is the mini-sode accompaniment to How Did That Happen, we have to talk about last week's episode, which was part 3 of the Israel-Hamas conflict, which I've said now is probably going to at least go to like 5 parts. It is, this was the first third part of anything I've ever done. Like I said, the second part was the first 2-part series I've ever done, but this just feels like something that was necessary. It feels like something that, almost why this podcast was created, was to talk about, just to break things down to the foundation. Let's look at that. Let's look at October the 7th and find out why that happened, and not just to say, because it bothers me, it irks me when I watch the news and listen to the news still, and they still want to make this seem like it happened in a vacuum. They want to make it seem like it occurred in a vacuum, and I think acknowledging that it didn't does not negate, or does not take away from the atrocities that were committed on October the 7th. I think that's always been the problem with people, even with the Israelis, about the idea of acknowledging the fact that the Palestinians were there first, and the things that they did in order to get the land that they had with some of those kibbutzes. It happened, and that's what I thought was so interesting about the documentary Tentura, is because it was made by an Israeli man who was just saying the same thing. He's like, hey, this happened. Like, I still think Israel should have the right to exist, but we can't deny that this also happened. And what you see, this stuff just compounds and it builds on itself. And I think that's how we get to October the 7th. And I just feel like you have to mention that, and it has to be said in conjunction with all the other stuff that's mentioned on the airwaves. And I just don't think it is. Right, so that's why I feel like it was necessary to do this multi-part series about the Israel-Hamas conflict. And I don't think, speaking about the last episode, I don't think that I mentioned, maybe I did enough. I talked about the Munich massacre, but what's crazy and what's wild about these Israelis, the IDF, bro, after this happened, because I told you about, like, basically everybody died in that massacre except for 3 dudes, the 3 of the actual terrorists, right? They were held in by the German authorities for like a month. And then they were put on a plane. That plane was, quote unquote, hijacked, right? And then the Germans felt they had nothing else, no other option but to give in, because what the guys wanted for their demands was for them to free the Palestinian prisoners that they had just taken. And so the Germans did that, like I said, without consulting anybody, the world, Israel, nobody. They just did it. We find out later that was all orchestrated by the German government because they just wanted to wash their hands of it. They wanted to be done with it, right? But what happens is, so all 3 of those guys go. Right, the Israeli Defense Force tracks down 2 of them abroad and murders them, just kills them. That's what the movie Munich is about. I thought the movie Munich was going to be about the Munich massacre. It's really not, and I say that because I wish someone had told me that before I went into it, because it's not that good of a movie. It's good for historical purposes. It was made like 15, 20 years ago. It's just not that good. I don't know. I like Eric Bana, right? He was good as the Hulk for that one movie. He's cool, right? Didn't love it, but that's what the movie is about. It's about how the IDF, or the Israeli forces overall, go and track down 2 out of the 3 guys that were left living after the Munich massacre. The third guy is living in hiding. I think I might have mentioned in the last episode, he's living in Africa in hiding because he saw what happened to the other two guys. Like, he already knows what's happened. He's seen this movie before. Like I said, you want to check out a good documentary about this stuff, about the Munich massacre specifically. Like I said, it's One Day in September. It's a very good documentary. Pretty much got all the information that I needed for that specific point in time from that actual documentary. Very good. We talked about a few different massacres in there, but yeah, on the next one we're going to talk about the 80s on forward, the 80s and 90s, because right at the end of the last episode we talked about the actual creation of Hamas and how even I in no way promote or think that they are doing the right thing, but it has to be said and somewhat impressive that the man who created it was a quadriplegic. I mean, geez, he couldn't walk, let alone use his arms. The man created a very large and somewhat successful terrorist group. I don't know, like it's something, right? I don't know what it is, but it's something. But yeah, we first talked about him. We're going to talk about the the Intifada. Kind of go from like late 80s on forward up to about the mid 2000s, and then the fifth one's going to bring us right into the actual conflict that's happening right now. And we're going to kind of figure out what we're going to do from there, whether we pivot with that and continue to talk about that, or we'll see as time goes on. But that's pretty much what's going on. I don't think there's much else to say about the last episode. But yeah, I hope you guys are finding it informative. You can find all the extras over at htthappen.com, all the socials at htthappen, of course, except for the TikTok, which is htthappen22. Give us 5 stars wherever you find this, wherever you're listening to this. Give us 2 stars if you didn't love it. Tell us why you didn't love it, because constructive criticism is always welcome. Like I said, I don't think there's much else to say. I always appreciate the people that come back and press play from week to week. So without further ado, as we're known to do, here is the episode.
Do I feel happy in life? Let's see. Let's say I hope I'm finding happiness. All right? Well, for me, if I can realize certain things in my work, I come the closest to being happy, and I can say that also about my life.
So, Marilyn Monroe, right? She was born Norma Jean Mortensen on June the 1st, 1926 at Los Angeles General Hospital in Los Angeles. I saw some places that said her name had been Norma Jean Baker as her first name, as the name she was given when she was born. I don't believe that to be true. I do believe her name was Norma Jean Mortensen. She would get Baker later.
On my birth certificate, I believe it says profession Baker. So she was just trying to think quickly, I guess, and said Baker. Well, in all my school records, it was Norma Jean Baker. In fact, I was always told, by the way, when I was very young, that my father was killed in an automobile accident in New York before I was born. When I was very young, I was told that.
Her mother's name was Gladys Pearl Baker, and that's probably where they got that from. Her actual maiden name, her mother, was Monroe, and that's actually where she got Marilyn Monroe, got her stage name, at least half of it.
Because, well, I wanted my mother's maiden name because I felt that rightfully was my name. I couldn't take my father's name very well. So I wanted at least something that was related. So I said, I want the name Monroe, which was my mother's maiden name.
But her mother was from a place named Piedras Negras, Coahuila, Mexico, right? And she was born to a poor Midwestern family, her mother, who migrated to California at the turn of the century. So like I said, Marilyn, she was born Norma Jean, right? And in 2002, DNA testing would indicate that her father was a man by the name of Charles Stanley Gifford, who was a co-worker with her mother. But Monroe also had 2 other siblings from the Giffords' marriage with his first wife, Doris, and a brother named Charles. Now, Norma Jean would have a very rough life, very rough upbringing. She had a good life, as far as you could say, in her adult life growing up, but she went through it. She would end up being abused. I think before she was even double-digit years old, her mother had been committed to a hospital and would kind of never leave there. She would kind of just end up being there for the rest of her life. She was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia in 1934. which, like I said, would have made, I think, Marilyn 7 years old at that time.
Well, when I was put in the orphan's home, and I refused to go into the orphan's home, I mean, I said, I saw the orphan, I could read the 10 orphan, and I put my feet down on the sidewalk, and they had to drag me in. I said, I'm not an orphan.
And so basically, her mother was never really fit to have a child, which is why even from an early age, even though her mother was around, she wasn't always living with her. They would go through times where she would live with her mother, but it wasn't a guaranteed thing. She bounced around from foster home to foster home. I think they said something like 12 foster homes in like a couple years, something like that. I could be getting that wrong. But in one of those, she would multiple of those, she would end up getting molested. And when you look at this woman, I never knew much about her, truthfully, besides just the anecdotal stuff. White dress over the subway grate, and President Kennedy, and their relationship, which we'll kind of get into here in a little bit. But you truthfully, and you can see it when you look at her. Once you know the things that are behind those eyes, there's a clip that I would encourage you to find. It's going to be on the works site and on the website httappen.com, of course. Check it out for the extras. It's where she's being interviewed in 1955, I think. And just about 3 minutes in to the interview, you can just see, I think she but when you got a lot of stuff going on, her mind just kind of goes elsewhere for a second, and you can see her face, and then you can see her remember that she's on TV, and then come back with this just like glamorous smile. You know what I mean? But you can glimpse into the sadness that she had. I mean, we can run it back even now. We've only gotten into her. Maybe she's 7 or 8 years old, but her mother has already been committed to a mental hospital at 7 or 8 years old. Right? She's gone. Mom's gone. Not going to see her anymore. The people she's living with, the men in the family, are molesting her. Right? She's bouncing from home to home. I mean, she was quoted as saying, "I didn't like the world around me because it was kind of grim. When I heard that this that there was this acting, I said, that's what I want to be. Some of my foster families used to send me to the movies to get me out of the house, and there I would sit all day and into the night, up in front, there with the screen so big, a little kid all alone, and I loved it." End quote. So this is really you see the movies being an escape, one of the initial escapes for her to get out of this just crazy tumultuous life that she was kind of thrust into in the early part of the 20th century. So she went to Van Nuys High School. Like this entire, I didn't know, because she's an LA girl through and through. Girl's from California. Like she just never really, I always thought, because I remember when I first heard about this whole idea of her not being like that Marilyn Monroe was a character or whatever, they were like, oh, she was like a small town girl. And what you think about it, I mean, California at this time also was not what it is today. It was still a lot of farms. It was still a lot of small towns. Los Angeles itself was still nothing compared to what it would be now. But so she goes to Van Nuys High School. The family that she's living with, in I think around that time, has to actually the father gets relocated to another part of the country, and due to California child protection laws, because she's a minor, they can't actually take her with her, right? Or take her with them. Did I say that right? Right. So as a solution, she marries the neighbor, she marries the neighbor's 21-year-old factory worker's son, James Doherty, on June the 19th, 1942, right after her 16th birthday.
She and her husband were going to West Virginia, and they were going to put me in a home, or, like I'd been before, or I could marry this boy who was 21 at the time. So I married. Oh no. I was 15 turning 16. When marriage took place, I was just turned 16. In the state of California, you can marry at 16, a girl. But it was arranged when I was 15.
That's how she finds, you gotta, but from this point, and even before then, she's a survivor. You know what I mean? She's a survivor. No one else, she knows, no one else is going to care about her. She doesn't want to go back into the system. Right, she's been in the system for years. By this point, her mom's been committed for almost 10 years. She's been molested, even by the people who want to take her with them. I think they were molesting her as well. I could be wrong. I think got kind of rough. But so she realizes, what can I do? What is there for me? What are the opportunities that I have in front of me? I can go back into the system, or I can marry this dude across the street who I probably already been making eyes at anyways, right? And so they do that. She drops out of high school, becomes a housewife. She said that, she immediately realized they were not fit to be together. She was said to have been, quote, dying of boredom during their marriage. Then the very next year, Doherty enlists in the Merchant Marines and gets stationed in Santa Catalina Island. Monroe moves with him. In 1944, Doherty, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I think it's Doherty. The people I've known that have it spelled as Dougherty, Doherty, right? I mean, maybe Dougherty, but Doherty. He was shipped to in 1944, he was shipped to the Pacific, where he remained for the next 2 years. This would not go well for him as far as his marriage to Marilyn Monroe, who was still Norma Jean Mortensen at this time. Or maybe she took his last name, I'm not sure. So when he left, Monroe moves in with her in-laws, moves in with basically just right next to where, the people have been living before, because she married, like I said, the neighbor's son. She moves in with them, starts to work at this job at the Radio Plane Company, which is a munitions factory in Van Nuys, because right now, of course, the same place that Doherty went, it's World War II, right? That's what's happening right now. The whole part of the country is focused on the fact that we are now in a war. 3 years before this, Japan shows up December 7th, 1941, starts killing a bunch of people. We're like, yo, they live that will live and forever live in infamy. Now we're in World War II. So the same year, 1944, she meets a photographer named David Conover, right? He's been sent by the U.S. Armed Forces to take pictures of people, morale-boosting pictures of female workers, to look at, like this, look at what these people are doing for us. Also, look how pretty they are. Although none of her pictures were used, they loved him so much, and she kind of got bit by the bug, in a way that she quit working the factories and began modeling for Conover and his friends. Of course, Doherty does not like this. Defying her deployed husband, she moved out on her own and signed a contract with Blue Book Model Agency in August of 1945. Now, once she does this, of course, now she's going to need a stage name. And we mentioned earlier, half that stage name is her mother's maiden name. And you really have to realize how much, think about the person. She almost never really got to know her mother, right? She got to know her enough to miss her, which is even sadder, I would say, than people who never got to know their parents. I don't know. I have my parents, so I'm not saying that from a place of privilege. I'm just saying, like, I don't really truly understand the difference of which one is better or not. Would you rather never know your parents or know them for like 4 or 5 years and continually miss them for the rest of your life? I really don't know. Well, I think because of that.
Lucky Land Casino, asking people, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
Lucky? In line at the deli, I guess?
Aha, in my dentist's office. More than once, actually.
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do.
In the car before my kids' PTA meeting.
Really?
Yes.
Excuse me, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
I never win and tell.
Well, there you have it. You can get lucky anywhere, playing at LuckyLandSlots.com. Play for free right now. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Because of that, I think that's why she ends up taking her mother's maiden name and using it as part of her stage name. I think it really means something to her. And as far as the other side, Marilyn, I think some guy she knew basically said he reminded her of this Broadway star named Marilyn Miller. And so she picked that. The very next year, 1946, she divorces Doherty. Like I said, dude goes to the Pacific. Imagine this. Imagine you married a woman, right? You lucked up, and the cute chick beside that lives next to you kind of has to marry you, right? Or else she goes back to the system. So she does. And things are cool, right? And she's working at a munitions, or no, she's a housewife, right? You're a merchant marine. All of a sudden, you get shipped off to World War II, and you lose out on Marilyn Monroe. It'd be like, I don't know, definitely not the same, but it'd be like if you like married, I don't know, Kim Kardashian, and then like went to go fight in Iraq and then find out that she's Kim Kardashian after that. You know what I mean? Like that guy, I wonder what his life was like. We haven't looked him up. We should. But yeah, so things kind of start there from her. She gets bit parts in movies. She doesn't immediately turn into the Marilyn Monroe that we know, but she does. I mean, if you look at this, and that's what I found when I was watching all of this, the research to get back to kind of learn, about her life. She was gorgeous. She was beautiful. It's not anecdotal. You know what I mean? You look at some of these people that they say, oh, she was so pretty, and like, oh, she was pretty for the times. No, this woman was beautiful for any time. She really was. And she had something that I think was so tangible and so visceral that I think people just they clung to her in a way. I think that as far as originality in this time, which you have to remember, she really comes of age as far as her stardom in the 50s, right? Which of course is Eisenhower's nuclear family, right? We are literally cookie cutting. We are making these families for America to look exactly perfectly the way they're supposed to look. And so that's, I think, one of the reasons that her rebelliousness, is that a word? I was gonna say rebellious nature, but is rebelliousness? We're just gonna live with that. Rebelliousness was, even though it wasn't, right? It wasn't. She was just wanted to be seen for who she was, but that was too much for that time, because at that time, women were not being seen for who they were. They were being seen for being housewives. They were being seen for cooking and cleaning, and sex, and whatever you can provide to a man to make his life better. And so the fact that you could see her life as a crusade for more, and I think we're gonna get to it a little bit later. It's really interesting to watch. I feel like her life is kind of the metaphor for women's empowerment through basically the 50s, I guess. She ended up signing to a few different production companies. She was signed with Columbia. She did some beer commercials, right, and posed nude. And this is wild. And I have a little bit of her explaining what was going on during that time.
It was all true. I was behind in the rent, and they usually let you get about a week behind in the rent. And Tom Kelly had asked me, I had done some beer ads for beer for him, and he had asked me to pose nude. Actually, I'd be in a bathing suit or something like that. So he asked me to pose nude, and his wife, Natalie Kelly, she'd be in the dressing room, and I'd be getting dressed and changing. So she said to him, probably, she got to do nudes or something. And then I got so far behind the rent, 4 weeks, and I was in debt and everything. So I called up and I said, "Are you sure they won't recognize?" He said, "I promise." I said, "Well, if it's at night and you don't have any helpers, to put the lights in." I said, "I don't know." I said, "I'm shy and I don't want to expose myself to, all the people you have." Then I said, "And at night?" He said, "All right, just Natalie and myself." So we did it.
I mean, it really makes sense. It really makes sense when you look at it. You want to. I think we always want to demonize people, especially in this somewhat secular nation that we have. But you want to demonize people for just doing what they got to do. She said, I was hungry, and you telling me all I got to do is show you what's under my shirt and I get money? It's not rocket science. And I respect her for having the dignity of just being like, yeah, I did it. Like they were like telling, like, don't do it. No, tell them that it wasn't you. Like, no, like she's like, I did it. I was there. That was me. You know what I mean? It paid the bills. But that, so that happened right around the time she was getting her first real big jump when she started this movie called The Asphalt Jungle, which is on, I think it's on Max. I watched like half of it. It's not bad. Her movies are actually okay. if you can get past the fact that for the most of them, they make her out to seem dumb, like super dumb. Like I have a couple clips of her just like, I don't know. I don't know. It's hard to explain. It's hard to watch now, knowing what we know about women and feminism. It's like they really had made this whole entire like structure around dumb women.
Is that where he is? Kansas City?
So I understand.
Well, why are you going to Atlantic City?
Who's going to Atlantic City?
Doesn't this plane go to Atlantic City?
What are you talking about? This is the Midland Sky, Chief.
Are you kidding?
Of course not. We should be in Kansas City in about 20 minutes. Why?
Oh, nothing. Just one of those things. Go on. Tell me some more. Tell me anything.
So yeah, I mean, they really had made just this whole industry out of just not that smart chicks, which is odd, in my opinion. But yeah, so she would start a bunch of movies, get married at least 3 times. Like we already got her first marriage, which is to old Doherty. I just have to know what happened to that man. I don't think I have it. I don't have it in the notes now, but you just imagine you come home from the war and you were married to Marilyn Monroe and now you're not. Gosh, that's sad. But then her second marriage was to Joe DiMaggio on January the 14th, 1954. They got married at San Francisco City Hall. They had been a couple for 2 years after Joe asked his agent to arrange a dinner date. they were only together for a couple years, and like literally, I think from the documentaries that I've watched, she was quite literally already plotting on her next husband while still married to old Joe, and Joe had his own problems. Joe was not in love with that famous scene that she did in the 7-Year Itch when got over the subway grate and blowing, her scene, which when you look at, I just watched it not too long ago. You think it's going to be crazy, right? You think you're going to see something. Like I don't know what, whatever you're going to see. You can see something. You just see her legs. You don't even see all her legs. Like legit, women wear skirts shorter than what you saw in that movie. And people lost their mind. Joe DiMaggio included. It was said that after he found out that what she did, he took her back up to their apartment and beat her down. Straight domestic violence city. Like she had bruises, all this stuff. I think he hit her a couple times. Like they said she had bruises all around her shoulders, which I took as he just gave her a really good shaking. He just shook the crap out of her. I can only imagine. But so he wasn't loving that. They were only married for a couple years. Marriage number 3 comes in June 29th, 1956. Like I said, her previous marriage, what is that? January 14th, 1954. 56, she marries playwright Arthur Miller. Would be her last marriage. They'd be together for a few years, and he would actually write the last movie that she would ever star in. It's called The Misfits. And the movie itself is an odd subject matter. Evidently, he had written a short story about this at some point before that, but it is about a group of men who go and lasso wild horses to be sold as dog food, which I don't even know if you could make that movie right now. Imagine if that was the plot of Yellowstone. Would you still like it? But that was the last movie she ever did. And Clark Gable's in that movie, oddly enough, and he would die right after the movie came out. The 60s, man, were no joke. If they ask you if you ever want to live in any decade, not the 60s, because people were just dying, it seems like. We're talking about Clark Gable, Marilyn Monroe, like I said, JFK, RFK, MLK. If you had a K in a name, you're probably getting killed. Like, it's wild. So those were the 3 marriages. And then, of course, we can get into the JFK and RFK affair. Now, what can be said is it seems like she got with both those guys. It does seem like she liked Robert Kennedy a little bit more. I think he was a little bit more her speed. She was said to like his intellectual capacity, where I think with JFK, it was probably more a power thing. I don't know. Was never there, right? Would love to be a fly on that wall. But the question is, was RFK there the day she died? Her housekeeper says so. Says she saw him. Makes a lot of sense. Other people also said they saw him catching a flight not too far from her house, not too long after she died. A lot of things don't quite add up. So during her final months, Monroe lived at 12305 5th Helena Drive in the Brentwood neighborhood of Los Angeles. Her housekeeper, as we mentioned earlier, Eunice Murray, was staying overnight at the home on the evening of August the 4th, 1962. The housekeeper woke at 3 a.m. on August the 5th and sensed that something was wrong. She saw a light from under Monroe's bedroom door, but was unable to get a response and found the door locked. Murray then called Monroe's psychiatrist, Ralph Greenson, who arrived at the house shortly after and broke into the bedroom through a window to find Monroe dead in the bed. Monroe's physician, Hyman Engelberg, arrived around 3:50 a.m. and pronounced her dead. About a half an hour later, LAPD was notified. Now, there have been any number of conspiracy theories that surround her death. One of the more interesting being that the Kennedys were involved. I don't know if I believe that. And I believed it for a long time. And it may still be true. I wouldn't put much past those guys. The Kennedys, as they say, are literally, and I wanted to do, honestly, truthfully, an episode on the Kennedys. Truth be told, this episode was supposed to be on John F. Kennedy. It was supposed to be on his life. The same way we did MLK's on the last one. But I just honestly thought that we had done too much. We done Kennedy. It seems like we're talking about Kennedy for the last month and a half. I feel like I've mentioned him on every single episode. And I knew that even with this, we were still going to do it, right? But I wanted to cover the Kennedys because they are basically America's dynasty. They are America's monarchy, or they were, And so it wouldn't surprise me that, because if you know the story, basically they had come to her not too long before this and said, "Hey, you got to chill. we gotta calm this down. This is a no more thing, right? Especially not John, right? Maybe Robert, but probably not still. And I think it really hurt her. Because like they say, I think they say that it was, like I said, John JFK was not too much. I think he was kind of a hit it and quit it sort of thing. But I think her and Robert were like matching wits in a way that I think really hurt her when she was forced to part ways. So the question is, were they involved? I don't know. Maybe. Probably. But that's Marilyn Monroe. We find that she was a very sad person.
But I'm not just generally happy. If I'm generally anything, I guess I'm generally miserable.
Very sad person. I didn't know that. As someone who, has, I would say, definitely not, maybe not Monroe levels of sadness, but has, sadness in them. There's a kinship in knowing that she was struggling with the same issues, somewhat, But I didn't know that about her, that she was so sad. And when you hear her interviews and you watch her, and knowing the things that we know about people now, you know what I mean? Knowing the ways that that depression exists, and that the trauma you experience as a child is very much at the forefront of your mind all throughout your life. It makes you, I'm in awe in some cases in watching her career and seeing what it become, because it could have been nothing. She could have just stayed that housewife in Van Nuys, but she chose to make something of herself and become one of the highest grossing entertainers, I think, of her time. Definitely of her time. I don't know if in the career of history or the career of like entertainment, but she definitely was one of the highest grossing entertainers of her career in that time frame. But yeah, that was Marilyn. All right, so that was Marilyn, or should we say Norma Jean? Norma Jean. And I think in a lot of ways, she was still Norma Jean. I heard someone say on a documentary, they said she was speaking in the third person, but when you hear her talking, it wasn't that she was speaking in the third person so much as I think that she saw herself, the character of Marilyn Monroe, as just that, a character, not a person. I think that happens with a lot of people who were in show business or in any entertaining capacity whatsoever. Is there is the entertainment version of you, and then there's the off the camera, off the mic version of you. They're different, and some people, they have different names. That's what I think. I think in a lot of cases, in a lot of ways, she was that same still Norma Jean, from 30s, California, 30s Los Angeles, that lived a hard life, that found a way out. She found a way out. But I don't know if there's much else to say here before we go ahead and get out of here. Got at least another month or so, maybe 2 months of the 40s to 70s, then we'll move on to our next series. All the extras, HTT Happen, of course, you guys know. HTTHappen.com is the website. HTT Happen 22 for the TikTok. Give us 5 stars if you loved it, 2 stars if you didn't. Tell us why you didn't love it, because constructive criticism is always welcome. As always, thank you for pressing play week to week for those that come back, and we'll see you next week with the next How Did That Happen? Well, what we're going to do, of course, always, what I've been kind of trying to do with these more recent episodes is find a small clip to play you guys out with that still touches on whatever we've been talking about here. So here's a little bit more Marilyn for you guys.
Oh, by the way, I slept in a room with 27 beds because they say some other number. I know when I read it. Because you had to work your way to the honor bed. You start with one, well, really the 27th bed, and you had to work your way down and around, and then you could work yourself into the other dormitory, which had fewer beds. But I got there once, but once I was putting on my shoes, and the matron said, "Go downstairs, I'm tying my shoe." She says, "Back to the 27th bed."
With the Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
This is your captain speaking. We've got clear runway and the weather's fine, but we're just going to circle up here a while and get lucky. No, nothing like that. It's just these cash prizes add up quick. So I suggest you sit back, keep your tray table upright, and start getting lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Hey guys, it is Ryan. I'm not sure if you know this about me, but I'm a bit of a fun fanatic when I can. I like to work, but I like fun too. It's a thing. And now the truth is out there. I can tell you about my favorite place to have fun. Chumba Casino. They have hundreds of social casino style games to choose from with new games released each week. You can play for free anytime, anywhere. And each day brings a new chance to collect daily bonuses. So join me in the fun. Sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.